The Alpha King's hand struck the stone wall beside Emily's head. The sound cracked through the grand hall like thunder. Hundreds of nobles froze beneath the silver chandeliers. Emily's back pressed against the cold marble. The royal cloak trembled between her hands, its black fabric trapped against her chest. She could feel Damian Blackwood standing only inches away, close enough that the warmth of his body cut through the chill of the stone behind her. No one dared to breathe. From across the hall, it looked like punishment. The most powerful Alpha in the kingdom had cornered an insignificant Omega Maid before the entire court. Emily's pulse hammered inside her throat. She had dropped his sacred cloak. She had disgraced the royal moon ceremony. And now the Alpha King's silver eyes were fixed upon her with an intensity she could not understand. His arm remained braced beside her face. His broad shoulders blocked the light. "Your Majesty," she whispered. Damian did not answer. His gaze shifted past her. Something flashed above them. A thin streak of silver tore through the air. Damian moved before anyone else saw it. His other arm swept around Emily's waist and pulled her hard against him. A ceremonial dart struck the wall where her throat had been a heartbeat earlier. Metal screamed against stone. Gasps erupted across the hall. Emily stared at the dart as it fell to the marble floor. Then she became aware of Damian's arm around her, of his hand holding her securely at the curve of her waist, of the impossible stillness that had fallen over the wolf inside him. Damian looked down at her. For one suspended second, neither of them moved. Something ancient stirred between them, something neither understood. And somewhere beneath Emily's sleeve, a forgotten silver mark burned once against her skin, then vanished. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in courage and destiny, hit like and subscribe. These stories remind us, love finds the broken. Now back to Emily. 3 hours earlier, she had believed the greatest danger awaiting her was an unfinished basket of laundry. Dawn had barely touched the towers of Blackthorn Palace when Emily Carter crossed the eastern courtyard carrying fresh linens against her chest. Pale mist drifted between the stone arches, and the air smelled of rain, roses, and smoke from the kitchens preparing for the royal moon ceremony. Servants hurried in every direction. Silver banners were being raised over the balconies. Musicians carried polished instruments into the grand hall. Royal guards inspected every gate twice. No one moved slowly that morning. No one except old Thomas, the palace gardener. Emily noticed him beside the fountain, struggling to lift a wooden crate overflowing with white moon roses. His hands shook beneath the weight, but every servant passing nearby pretended not to see. Emily stopped. She glanced toward the eastern wing. The head housekeeper had ordered the linens delivered before sunrise. She was already late. Still, she set the basket down. "Let me help you." Thomas looked up, embarrassed. "You'll get yourself scolded again." "Probably," Emily said with a small smile. But the roses shouldn't suffer for it. Together, they carried the crate beneath the flowering archway. From the upper steps, 2 young attendants watched them. One rolled her eyes. "She'll never learn." "She's an Omega," the other replied. "Being useful is the closest she'll ever come to being important." Emily heard them. She always heard them. She simply chose not to answer. At 20 years old, she had spent 8 years serving inside Blackthorn Palace. Long enough to understand that cruelty often wore perfume and silk. Long enough to know that people who considered kindness a weakness rarely recognized strength unless it frightened them. Thomas touched her arm before she left. "Your mother would have been proud of you." Emily's smile faltered. "I never knew my mother." The old gardener's expression shifted with regret. "Forgive me. There's nothing to forgive." She picked up the laundry basket and continued toward the palace. Yet the words followed her. "Your mother would have been proud." Emily had no memories before St. Alara Chapel. No parents. No family name except the one written by a tired nun who had found her, sleeping beneath the chapel stairs. Only one thing remained from her childhood, a pale crescent-shaped mark beneath her left wrist. The sisters had always called it a birthmark. But sometimes, beneath a full moon, it seemed to glow. Emily reached the servants' corridor just as the head housekeeper emerged from the eastern hall. Mrs. Vale was a severe woman with silver hair pulled tightly beneath a black cap. Her gaze dropped immediately to the late linens. "You stopped again." Emily lowered her eyes. "Mr. Thomas needed help." "Mr. Thomas always needs help. He might have injured himself." Mrs. Vale exhaled through her nose, equal parts frustrated and unsurprised. One day, Emily Carter, your need to rescue everyone will place you in danger. Emily offered a faint smile. Then I hope someone rescues me. Neither woman noticed the shadow standing behind the carved pillar at the end of the corridor. Lady Seraphine Vale, daughter of one of the kingdom's most influential alpha lords, had arrived early for the ceremony. She wore a white gown threaded with pearls and a jeweled wolf at her throat. Her beautiful face remained calm, but her eyes followed Emily with unmistakable dislike. Only the night before, Seraphine had overheard two guards discussing the Alpha King's refusal to choose a bride. He had rejected noble women from 7 territories. He had dismissed every alliance. And according to an ancient prophecy whispered among the oldest families, his true mate would not arrive wearing a crown. She would be recognized by the kingdom itself. Seraphine had laughed at the story, until she saw the crescent mark on Emily's wrist. Now, as Emily disappeared into the laundry room, Seraphine turned toward her personal maid. Find out what duty they give her during the ceremony. The maid hesitated. Why? Seraphine's gaze remained fixed on the doorway. Because accidents are easiest to arrange when everyone is already afraid of making one. Inside the laundry room, Emily knew nothing of the danger moving quietly around her. She folded ceremonial cloths, repaired a torn ribbon, and helped a frightened kitchen apprentice hide the evidence of a broken porcelain bowl before Mrs. Vale could find it. The palace bells rang once, then twice. The royal moon ceremony would begin within the hour. Emily was tying the final bundle of linens when the room fell suddenly silent. Mrs. Vale stood in the doorway. Across her arms rested a long garment wrapped in embroidered white cloth. Every servant recognized it immediately. The royal cloak. The black ceremonial mantle worn only by Alpha King Damien Blackwood. Mrs. Vale walked directly toward Emily. No, Emily whispered before the woman could speak. Several servants exchanged amused glances. Mrs. Vale ignored them. The senior attendant assigned to deliver it has fallen ill. Choose someone else. You know every passage to the Grand Hall. You are careful, and you do not gossip. I was late this morning. You were helping someone. That is not the same as being reliable. Mrs. Vale placed the garment into Emily's arms. The weight surprised her, not because it was heavy, because of what it represented. The cloak had been worn by every Alpha King of Blackthorn for 400 years. Its silver embroidery carried the symbols of conquest, protection, and unity. During the ceremony, Damien would wear it before the entire kingdom. Dropping it would be an insult. Damaging it would be unforgivable. Take the Eastern Passage, Mrs. Vale instructed. Do not stop. Do not speak to anyone. Place it directly into the hands of the royal attendant. Emily swallowed. Yes, ma'am. She adjusted the wrapped cloak against her arms and stepped into the corridor. The palace seemed different now. Louder. Sharper. Every footstep felt like a warning. As Emily passed beneath the stained glass windows, sunlight moved across the floor in pools of crimson and gold. Servants stepped aside when they saw what she carried. Some looked impressed. Others looked disappointed that such an honor had been given to an Omega. Emily kept her eyes forward. At the far end of the corridor, the golden doors of the grand hall stood open. Music drifted through them. Hundreds of nobles had already gathered inside. She was nearly there. Then someone stepped from behind a marble column. Lady Seraphine. Emily immediately stopped and bowed. My lady. Seraphine smiled. It was the kind of smile that never reached the eyes. You're carrying something important. Yes, my lady. You must be very proud. No, only careful. Seraphine moved aside. Then don't let me delay you. Emily continued. She passed the noble woman without incident. For one brief moment, relief loosened the tension in her shoulders. Then the toe of Seraphine's jeweled shoe slid beneath the edge of the ceremonial carpet. She lifted it no more than an inch. Emily's next step caught. Her balance vanished. The wrapped cloak slipped from her arms. The white covering opened. Black fabric spread through the air like the wings of a falling raven. The royal cloak struck the marble floor before the entire court. Music stopped. Conversation died. Emily remained frozen at the entrance. 100 faces turned toward her. Then the great doors at the opposite end of the hall opened. Alpha King Damien Blackwood entered, and his silver eyes went directly to the frightened Omega standing above his fallen cloak. Silence swept across the grand hall with crushing force. The royal cloak lay across the polished marble like a piece of midnight fallen from the sky. No one moved. No one dared to breathe. Emily Carter remained frozen where she stood, her hands still suspended in the air as though they refused to believe the cloak was no longer there. She heard a noblewoman whisper, "An Omega." Another voice followed. She touched the king's cloak. Someone farther back muttered, "She's finished." The words spread through the hall like a cold wind. Emily slowly lowered herself onto one knee. Her fingers trembled violently as she reached for the sacred garment. Every lesson she had learned inside Blackthorn Palace echoed through her mind. Never embarrass the crown. Never dishonor the royal family. Never become the reason an entire room falls silent. Yet somehow, she had done all three. "I'm sorry." The apology escaped her lips before anyone had spoken. She carefully lifted the cloak. The fabric remained immaculate. Not a single stain. Not a single tear. But somehow, that only made her feel worse. Because everyone had witnessed it. Every alpha lord. Every noble family. Every palace servant. Every royal guard. The humiliation belonged to memory now. It could never be undone. Then, footsteps. Slow. Measured. Heavy enough that each one seemed to command the entire palace. Emily didn't need to look up. She knew who it was. Alpha King Damian Blackwood crossed the marble floor without haste. He wore ceremonial black trimmed with silver. His long cloak flowed behind him like a shadow. No crown rested upon his head. He didn't need one. Authority surrounded him as naturally as breathing. Servants lowered their eyes. Guards straightened. Even proud alpha nobles instinctively stepped aside. No announcement was necessary. The room obeyed. Before he spoke a single word, Damian stopped several feet in front of Emily. She could only see the polished black boots before her. Her heartbeat thundered inside her ears. "I'm sorry, Your Majesty." Her voice barely carried. "The fault is mine." She expected immediate judgment. Instead, silence. Long enough for uncertainty to become unbearable. Emily finally gathered the courage to raise her eyes. The Alpha King wasn't looking at the fallen cloak. He was looking at her. Not with anger. Not with contempt. With quiet observation. Almost curiosity. It unsettled her more than rage ever could. "You know what this cloak represents." His voice was calm, deep, impossible to ignore. "Yes, Your Majesty." And yet, he glanced briefly toward the cloak in her hands. "You still picked it up before anyone ordered you to." Emily blinked. I couldn't leave it on the floor, even knowing everyone was watching. Especially because everyone was watching. Another silence. One that felt strangely different. Damian had questioned thousands of people throughout his reign. Liars almost always searched for excuses. Cowards searched for someone else to blame. Emily did neither. She simply accepted responsibility. Without bargaining. Without pleading. Without pretending she was innocent. Interesting. Very interesting. Behind Damian, whispers continued. Lord Hawthorne stepped forward. A powerful alpha noble with silver hair and decades of influence inside the royal court. "Your Majesty." Damian didn't look away from Emily. "What is it?" "The royal moon ceremony cannot begin under such an unfortunate omen." Several nobles nodded immediately. Lord Hawthorne continued. "The servant should be dismissed before the ceremony proceeds." Another noble agreed. Perhaps publicly. It would reassure the kingdom. Emily closed her eyes. There it was. Exactly what she had expected. Dismissal. Disgrace. Perhaps even exile from the palace she had called home since childhood. She inhaled slowly. "If dismissal restores honor to today's ceremony," she whispered, "I accept it." Several servants quietly looked away. Even Mrs. Vale couldn't hide the sadness in her expression. Emily wasn't arguing. She wasn't crying. She simply accepted the consequences. Damian noticed that too. His wolf stirred quietly inside him. Not because she was Omega, because courage had its own scent. He took one slow step closer. Emily instinctively stepped backward, then another. Damian continued forward. Not aggressively, simply steadily. Emily retreated again, until cold stone met her back. The ancient wall of Blackthorn Palace stopped her retreat. She looked around. There was nowhere left to go. The distance between them disappeared. Damian now stood close enough for Emily to notice faint silver threads woven into the collar of his ceremonial uniform. Close enough to feel the warmth radiating from him. Close enough for every noble in the room to believe they were about to witness punishment. Lord Hawthorne folded his arms. Several noble women looked away. One young servant silently covered her mouth. Emily lowered her gaze. If punishment is necessary, she whispered, please don't blame Mrs. Vale. She only trusted me. I failed her. Damien said nothing. Instead, his silver eyes shifted. Not toward Emily. Past her. A tiny reflection flashed across the polished marble behind her shoulder. So brief that no one else noticed. His expression changed instantly. Every instinct inside the Alpha King awakened. Danger. Without hesitation, his left hand struck the wall beside Emily's head. The impact echoed through the hall. Emily gasped. Before she could react, Damien's right arm wrapped firmly around her waist. He pulled her against him. Her breath caught. The world seemed to stop. An instant later, crack. A ceremonial steel dart shot downward from the damaged banner above. It slammed into the exact place where Emily's neck had been. Fragments of stone scattered across the marble. Several noble women screamed. Royal guards immediately looked upward. Secure the balcony. Move. Within seconds, soldiers rushed toward the upper gallery. A decorative fastening had snapped loose during the ceremony preparations. The sharpened ceremonial dart had fallen directly toward Emily. Had Damien hesitated, even by a single heartbeat, the dart would have struck her. The hall remained frozen. No one spoke. No one understood what they had just witnessed. Emily slowly opened her eyes. She realized she wasn't against the wall anymore. She was against Damien. One hand still rested around her waist. His body completely shielded hers. She looked up. So, she whispered. You weren't. Damien released her immediately. His expression returned to its usual calm. I was preventing a second accident. Emily looked toward the dart embedded in the stone. Only then did she understand. He hadn't cornered her. He had saved her. A murmur swept through the court. Everything they thought they had seen had been wrong. Damien turned toward the nobles. His voice remained perfectly composed. One mistake, he said, does not erase years of loyalty. His gaze settled briefly upon Lord Hawthorne. And fear must never become justice. No one challenged him. No one dared. Mrs. Vale quietly wiped tears from her eyes. Emily looked down at the royal cloak still resting safely in her hands. She stepped forward carefully. I'm sorry, Your Majesty. This belongs to you. Damien reached out. Emily instinctively did the same. Their fingers touched. Barely. Only the tips. No more than 2 seconds. Yet the entire world seemed to inhale. A strange warmth traveled through Emily's hand. Up her wrist. Toward the crescent-shaped mark hidden beneath her sleeve. She froze. At the exact same moment, Damien stopped breathing. Inside him, his wolf became completely silent. Not growling. Not restless. Simply listening. Impossible. He had touched countless people throughout his life. Generals. Nobles. Foreign queens. Children. Servants. Never. Not once had his wolf reacted like this. Emily quickly released the cloak. So sorry, she whispered. I didn't mean, you didn't. Damien answered automatically, still staring at her hand, still trying to understand why the faint scent of moonflowers seemed to linger in the air, even though there were none inside the grand hall. For the first time in many years, Alpha King Damien Blackwood left the ceremony carrying far more than the royal cloak. He carried a question, one that refused to leave his mind. Why did touching one ordinary Omega make his wolf awaken? For the very first time, the royal moon ceremony continued. At least, it appeared to. Musicians resumed their performance. The silver bells echoed beneath the vaulted ceiling. Priests began reciting the ancient vows of the Moon Kingdom. Nobles returned to their assigned places. Yet something invisible had changed. No one said Emily Carter's name aloud, but everyone looked at her. The Omega Maid who had dropped the royal cloak. The servant the Alpha King had personally protected. The young woman whose mistake had somehow ended not with punishment, but mercy. Emily wished nothing more than to disappear. She quietly stepped away from the center of the hall, keeping her eyes lowered as another attendant accepted the royal cloak from Damien and carefully fastened it across his shoulders. The black fabric settled against him with effortless authority, as though it had always belonged there. Mrs. Vale approached Emily once the ceremony began. Are you hurt? Emily blinked. No. You look pale. I think. Emily hesitated. I'm simply embarrassed. Mrs. Vale almost smiled. You've survived worse. Emily looked toward the ceremonial platform. No, she whispered. I haven't. High above the grand hall, Damien remained perfectly composed. Every noble watching him believed the incident had already passed. Only Damien knew otherwise. His attention drifted briefly toward his right hand, the same hand that had brushed Emily's fingers moments earlier. He could still remember it. Not the touch itself, the silence afterward. His wolf had stopped. Not from fear, not from submission. It had simply become still, as if listening to someone whose voice it had been waiting centuries to hear. Impossible. Mate bonds were ancient, rare. Most existed only in legends preserved by royal historians. Even then, they never awakened from a single accidental touch. Damien forced himself to return his attention to the ceremony. Yet every few moments, his eyes searched the crowd, until they found Emily. Emily spent the remainder of the ceremony helping elderly attendants refill ceremonial lanterns along the western aisle. She kept her head lowered. She answered every request politely. She behaved exactly as she had every day for the last 8 years. If anyone expected her to become proud after receiving the Alpha King's mercy, they were disappointed. If anything, she appeared even quieter than before. An elderly servant accidentally dropped several crystal cups. Emily knelt immediately. Careful, you'll cut your hands. The woman sighed. My eyesight isn't what it used to be. Emily smiled warmly. Then let mine help yours. Nearby, Damien saw everything. He wasn't watching intentionally. His eyes simply found her again. And again, each time he expected to discover she had changed. Each time, she proved him wrong. The ceremony finally ended shortly before noon. Guests slowly left the grand hall. Royal guards opened the towering bronze doors. Sunlight flooded the marble floor. Emily released a long breath. She had survived, or so she believed. As she stepped into the eastern corridor carrying an empty tray of ceremonial candles, a familiar voice stopped her. Emily. She turned. Mrs. Vale stood waiting. The Alpha King has dismissed everyone except the senior attendants. Emily nodded. I'll return to the laundry wing. Mrs. Vale hesitated. Not yet. Emily frowned. His Majesty requested the royal cloak be inspected before it's returned to the royal chambers. I'm to assist. Mrs. Vale gave a single nod. Emily's stomach tightened. Yes. Several minutes later, Emily entered a quiet chamber adjoining the grand hall. Unlike the magnificent ceremonial hall, this room was simple. Stone walls, tall windows, one long oak table. The royal cloak rested neatly across its polished surface. Only 3 people occupied the chamber. Mrs. Vale, the senior royal attendant, and Alpha King Damien Blackwood. Emily bowed immediately. Your Majesty. Damien acknowledged her with a slight inclination of his head. The clasp. He spoke without looking at her. It was damaged. Emily glanced toward the cloak. One silver fastening had indeed bent during the fall. Her expression filled with guilt. I'm sorry. Damien calmly shook his head. The damage wasn't caused by you. Emily looked confused. The ceremonial dart struck the clasp after I pulled you away. Only then did Emily notice the tiny dent in the silver wolf emblem. She stared silently. If Damien had arrived 1 heartbeat later, the dart would have struck her. Mrs. Vale quietly left the chamber with the senior attendant, allowing the royal tailor to fetch replacement fittings. Before Emily realized what had happened, she and Damien were suddenly alone. The silence felt strangely different now. Not frightening. Just unexpected. Emily folded her hands together. I'm grateful. Damien looked toward her. For what? You saved my life. I fulfilled my duty. You risked yours. Damien's expression barely changed. A king who refuses to protect his people has already failed them. Emily lowered her eyes. No noble she had ever met spoke like that. Outside the open window, a soft breeze stirred the white curtains. Emily noticed the damaged clasp still resting beside the cloak. It can probably be repaired. She reached toward it. At the exact same moment, Damien reached for it as well. Their hands touched again. This time, neither had time to pull away immediately. 3 seconds. Perhaps 4. A faint pulse spread through the room. Emily inhaled sharply. Warmth traveled beneath her skin. The small crescent-shaped mark beneath her sleeve tingled again. For an instant, she thought she heard distant wolves howling somewhere beyond the palace walls. Damien felt it too. Current. Ancient. Powerful. His wolf rose abruptly. Not in aggression. Recognition. The sensation disappeared almost immediately. Emily quickly withdrew her hand. I'm sorry. Damien remained silent. His gaze lingered on her wrist. Not because he had seen the hidden mark. Because, for the briefest heartbeat, he thought silver light had escaped beneath her sleeve. Surely, he imagined it. A knock interrupted the moment. Captain Theodore Ashcroft entered. Tall, disciplined, the Alpha King's most trusted investigator. Your Majesty. Damien stepped back naturally. What is it? The Western delegation has arrived. I'll be there shortly. Theodore nodded. Only then did he notice Emily. She bowed respectfully. The captain returned the gesture. But before leaving, his experienced eyes quietly studied the room. The damaged clasp. Emily. Damien. The unusual silence. He asked no questions. Yet years of serving beside the Alpha King had taught him one thing. Damien rarely remained alone with anyone, especially not twice in one day. After Emily left, Theodore closed the chamber door. You seem distracted. Damien adjusted the repaired clasp without answering. Theodore waited. Finally, Damien spoke. Tell me something. Anything. How much do you know about maid bonds? Theodore blinked. The question caught him completely off guard. Only what's recorded in the royal archives. And they're extraordinarily rare. Legends claim wolves recognize their destined partner instinctively. Damien remained silent. Theodore continued carefully. Most scholars believe they're myths. My wolf doesn't. The words escaped Damien before he realized he had spoken them aloud. Theodore stared. For perhaps the first time in 15 years. He saw genuine uncertainty in his king. Damien looked toward the closed door Emily had just walked through, then quietly gave an order. I want a complete investigation. The woman's name? Emily Carter. The Omega Maid. Theodore nodded. Do you suspect a crime? No. Then what am I looking for? Damien's silver eyes remained fixed upon the doorway. The truth. Outside, Emily walked peacefully across the sunlit courtyard carrying a basket of folded linens. She paused to help a frightened stable boy gather spilled grain before continuing toward the eastern wing. She never once looked back. She never imagined that somewhere behind the palace walls, the most powerful alpha in the kingdom had just begun searching for the forgotten story of her life. And neither of them knew that someone else had already noticed the way Damien looked at her. From the upper balcony, Lady Seraphine watched Emily disappear below. Her beautiful smile slowly faded. No, she whispered. It cannot be her. But deep inside, for the first time, fear began to replace certainty, because she had seen something the others had missed. When Damien reached for the royal cloak, he had looked at Emily, not like a king looking at a servant, but like a wolf, trying to remember a scent it had lost long ago. The palace had a way of swallowing secrets. By daylight, Blackthorn Palace glittered with polished marble, silver banners, and disciplined guards. By night, its endless corridors whispered of forgotten kings, broken vows, and prophecies buried beneath centuries of silence. Emily had never believed those stories. Legends belonged to nobles. She belonged to the servants' wing. Or so she thought. 2 days passed after the royal moon ceremony. Life inside the palace appeared to return to normal. Emily washed linens, helped in the kitchens, delivered medicine to elderly servants, repaired torn uniforms. Every morning, she crossed the eastern courtyard before sunrise. Every evening, she returned to her small room beneath the old clock tower. Yet one thing refused to return to normal. People stared. Not openly. Never while she was looking. But she felt it. The whispers stopped whenever she entered a room. Conversations changed direction. Even servants who had ignored her for years suddenly lowered their voices. The king protected her. I heard he touched her. They were alone afterward. It doesn't mean anything, doesn't it? Emily pretended not to hear, but every word made her shoulders a little heavier. Meanwhile, Captain Theodore Ashcroft stood inside the royal archives. Dust floated through pale shafts of afternoon sunlight. Ancient shelves stretched from floor to ceiling. Thousands of records, birth registries, military reports, family bloodlines, forgotten treaties. Theodore placed a thin folder onto the librarian's desk. I need everything on Emily Carter. The elderly archivist adjusted his spectacles. The palace servant? Yes. He opened several ledgers. Minutes passed. Then, a frown. Strange. What is it? There are records from 8 years ago. The librarian flipped another page. Employment approval. Medical examination. Work assignments. But The years before that are missing. Theodore remained silent. Missing. No orphan registration. No adoption papers. No village census. No transportation records. It is as though the old man hesitated. She appeared from nowhere. That evening, Damien stood alone on the western balcony overlooking the kingdom. Rain clouds gathered beyond the mountains. The wind carried the scent of pine forests and distant rivers. Normally, moments like these quieted his wolf. Tonight, nothing felt quiet. Every time he closed his eyes, he remembered Emily's expression after realizing he had saved her. Not fear, not admiration, gratitude. Simple, honest, untouched by ambition. The palace doors opened behind him. Theodore. Damien didn't turn. I have your report. And there isn't one. Only then did Damien face him. The captain handed over a thin folder. It doesn't make sense. Damien skimmed the pages. Employment records. Routine evaluations. Recommendations. Nothing unusual. Until the first page. Origin. Unknown. Damien slowly raised his eyes. Explain. Theodore folded his arms. Every citizen leaves traces. A village. A family. A tax record. A church. Emily has none. What about St. Hilaire Chapel? I visited. And the sisters remember raising her. But no one remembers where she came from. One elderly nun told Theodore something she almost refused to repeat. When we found her, she wasn't crying. Damien waited. She was sleeping beneath moonlight, completely alone. No footprints, no wagon, no travelers, nothing. Only a silver blanket, embroidered with symbols no one recognized. The blanket disappeared years ago. No one knew where. The room fell silent. Far below, Emily hurried through the gardens carrying herbal tea toward the infirmary. Dark clouds rolled across the sky. Rain would arrive soon. She noticed one of the younger palace maids struggling to gather fresh linens before the storm. Emily smiled. I'll help. Together they collected the laundry just as the first raindrops began to fall. The younger girl laughed. You're always rescuing someone. Emily shrugged. It makes the work lighter. No. The girl smiled. You make people lighter. Emily laughed softly. No one noticed. From the western balcony, someone had been watching. Damien. Not intentionally. His meeting with Theodore had ended only moments before. Yet somehow, his eyes had found Emily again. He watched as she gave her own cloak to the younger maid when the rain became heavier, leaving herself soaked. His wolf stirred quietly. Again, across the palace, Lady Seraphine slammed a silver brush onto her dressing table. Her maid flinched. Still watching her, the maid asked carefully. Seraphine's reflection remained perfectly composed. The king has never noticed anyone. Until now. It could still mean nothing. Seraphine slowly stood. No, I know wolves. They don't look twice without reason. She crossed the room toward an old wooden chest. Inside rested a faded scroll sealed with black wax. A prophecy, one her family had guarded for generations. She carefully unrolled it. The ink had faded with age. Most lines had become unreadable. Only one sentence remained perfectly preserved. When the moon chooses her daughter, the king's wolf shall remember before the king does. Seraphine stared at the words. No, she whispered. Not an orphan. Not a servant. It should have been me. That same night, Emily couldn't sleep. Rain tapped gently against the tiny window of her room. Moonlight slipped through moving clouds. She rubbed her left wrist absent-mindedly. The crescent-shaped birthmark felt strangely warm. Warmer than usual. Almost alive. She frowned. Perhaps. She had worked too much. She blew out the candle, closed her eyes, and dreamed. She stood inside a forest unlike any she had ever seen. Silver trees stretched endlessly beneath an enormous full moon. White wolves moved silently between glowing flowers. None threatened her. Instead, they bowed their heads as she passed. A gentle female voice echoed through the forest. Find him. Emily turned. No one stood there. The voice came again. He has searched for you far longer than he knows. Then, another figure appeared. Not human. An enormous black wolf. Larger than any creature Emily had ever imagined. Silver eyes. Powerful shoulders. Ancient scars across its chest. The wolf approached slowly. Emily should have been terrified. Instead, she felt safe. The wolf lowered its head. Its forehead touched hers. Warmth flooded her entire body. The crescent mark beneath her wrist blazed with silver light. Emily gasped and woke. She sat upright in bed. Her breathing was uneven. The room was dark. Rain had stopped. Moonlight streamed through the window. She looked immediately toward her wrist. The mark was glowing. Not brightly, only enough to illuminate the skin around it. Within seconds, the light disappeared. Emily stared in stunned silence. Had she imagined it? A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Emily, Mrs. Vale's voice came through the door. Are you awake? Emily quickly pulled down her sleeve. Yes. The king requires additional attendance tomorrow. Emily swallowed. For what duty? I don't know. But Captain Ashcroft specifically requested you. Emily's heartbeat skipped. The captain requested me? Mrs. Vale sounded equally confused. So it seems. After the footsteps faded down the corridor, Emily remained sitting motionless. She had spent years trying to avoid attention. Now, the attention of the most powerful people in the kingdom seemed impossible to escape. Elsewhere, far beneath Blackthorn Palace, hidden below layers of ancient stone, a circular chamber remained sealed behind enormous iron doors. No servant knew it existed. No noble spoke its name. In its center stood an ancient stone pedestal. Upon it rested a crystal unlike any found in the kingdom. For centuries, it had remained completely dark. Without warning, a faint thread of silver light appeared inside it. Then another. Then another. The ancient crystal awakened. Very slowly, very quietly, as though recognizing a presence long believed lost. An old guardian sleeping outside the chamber suddenly opened his eyes. He stared toward the glowing crystal. His weathered face turned pale. After 40 years, the Moonheart had finally responded. Someone had returned to Blackthorn Palace, and destiny had already begun to move. The rain had washed Blackthorn Palace clean. Morning sunlight spilled across the ancient towers, turning every silver banner into a ribbon of light. From the outside, it looked peaceful. Inside, invisible currents had already begun to shift. Emily barely slept. The dream lingered long after sunrise. The silver forest, the enormous black wolf, the gentle voice. Most of all, the feeling of absolute safety when the wolf had rested its forehead against hers. She had never experienced anything like it, not even as a child. You'll be late. Mrs. Vale's voice pulled her back to reality. Emily hurried into her uniform, tying her apron with slightly trembling hands. Today was different. Captain Theodore Ashcroft had requested her by name. No explanation, no reason, only an order. Nearly an hour later, Emily stood outside the royal library. Unlike the Grand Hall, this part of the palace remained almost silent. Only scholars, royal advisors, and members of the King's Council were permitted inside. Emily had never crossed its carved oak doors before. Captain Theodore appeared precisely on time. You are Emily Carter. Yes, Captain. You'll assist the archivists today. Emily blinked. The archivists? The library is being reorganized. You'll move books, clean shelves, and carry documents. She bowed. Of course. Theodore studied her for a brief moment. She looked genuinely relieved, almost grateful. Interesting. If she suspected she was being investigated, she hid it remarkably well. High above the library, Damien watched from the second-floor gallery, hidden behind carved stone railings. He wasn't spying. At least, that was what he kept telling himself. The library gave him an excuse. He often reviewed military reports there. Today, no reports held his attention. Instead, his gaze followed Emily as she carefully dusted shelves nearly twice her height. Every few minutes, she stopped to help one of the elderly archivists carry stacks of heavy books. She never waited to be asked. She simply noticed, then helped. The oldest librarian smiled warmly. You remind me of someone. Emily looked up. Who? The late Queen. Emily almost laughed. I think you've mistaken me for someone much kinder. The old man chuckled. No. The Queen believed power existed to protect. So do you. Emily's smile slowly faded. I have no power. The librarian quietly replied. Kindness is one. Damien heard every word. His wolf stirred again. Not because of Emily. Because of the truth inside the old man's voice. Hours passed peacefully. Until Emily reached the highest shelf in the Western Archive. A thick leather book rested beyond her fingertips. She carefully climbed one more step. The old wooden ladder creaked. Theodore looked up. Something wasn't right. One support peg slipped free. The ladder shifted violently. Emily lost her balance. Books tumbled from the shelf. The ladder tipped backward. Before anyone could react, a powerful hand caught the ladder. Another arm caught Emily. She gasped as strong hands steadied her before she struck the floor. For the second time in less than a week, she found herself looking directly into Damien Blackwood's silver eyes. The room fell silent. The ladder slowly settled back into place. Damien released it only after ensuring Emily stood safely. You should inspect equipment before climbing. His voice remained calm. Emily lowered her head. I should have. The elderly archivist hurried forward. Your Majesty, forgive us. That ladder has stood there for years. Damien glanced briefly toward the broken support peg. It didn't fail naturally. The room became quiet again. Theodore immediately crouched beside the ladder. Fresh tool marks. Someone had deliberately loosened the wooden pin. His expression darkened. Emily noticed the captain examining the ladder. Was it? She hesitated. An accident? Theodore didn't answer immediately. No. The single word chilled the room. Someone had tried to make her fall. From the opposite end of the library, a young servant quietly slipped away unnoticed. Only one person saw him leave. Damien. His silver eyes narrowed almost imperceptibly. The young servant wasn't one of the regular palace staff. He wore borrowed clothing. His pace was too deliberate, too careful. Theodore. The captain immediately understood. I'll handle it. Within seconds, he disappeared after the fleeing figure. Emily remained standing beside the damaged ladder. Confusion filled her thoughts. Who would sabotage an old ladder? More importantly, why today? Why while she was using it? Damien looked toward her. Were you injured? She instinctively shook her head. No, Your Majesty. You've said those words twice already. Emily looked confused. What words? I'm fine. You seem determined to convince everyone except yourself. For the first time, Emily smiled. A genuine smile. Small. Warm. I've never had much time to think about being hurt. Damien studied her quietly. What do you think about? Emily answered without hesitation. Whether everyone else is. The simplicity of her answer caught him completely off guard. At that exact moment, a sharp pain shot through Emily's left wrist. She instinctively grabbed it. The hidden crescent mark beneath her sleeve suddenly burned. Not painfully, urgently. Her breathing quickened. Damien noticed immediately. What happened? She looked down. Nothing. But it wasn't nothing. Silver light briefly escaped between the fabric covering her wrist. So faint that anyone else would have missed it. Damien didn't. His wolf reacted violently. Not with rage. Recognition. The ancient instinct inside him surged forward. Find her. Protect her. The sensation vanished almost as quickly as it came. Emily slowly lowered her arm. I'm sorry. Damien stepped closer. Show me your wrist. Emily froze. My wrist. The one you're hiding. She instinctively took one step backward. It really is nothing. For reasons she couldn't explain, fear rose inside her. Not fear of Damien. Fear of the mark itself. Fear that if anyone saw it, everything would change. Damien noticed her hesitation. He did not move closer. Instead, he quietly said, when someone fears showing a wound, it is usually because someone taught them to hide it. Emily's eyes widened. No one had ever understood her so quickly. The silence broke as Captain Theodore returned. He looked unusually serious. The servant escaped. Damien's attention shifted. Identity. False. The uniform belonged to another attendant. So whoever planned this wanted to remain invisible. Theodore nodded. And there's something else. He handed Damien a tiny piece of black ribbon. It was tied beneath the ladder. Damien examined it. Embroidered into one corner. A silver crescent enclosed by thorn vines. His expression hardened. He recognized it immediately. It was not a family crest. It was older. Far older. The forgotten symbol of the Order of the Eclipse. A secret faction officially destroyed nearly 20 years ago. A faction whose members believed the ancient moon prophecy should never come true. That evening, Lady Seraphine sat alone in her private chambers. A nervous maid entered carrying a small wooden box. My lady, it wasn't successful. Seraphine closed her eyes. I expected as much. The man escaped. He won't speak. He doesn't know enough to. The maid hesitated. What if the king discovers? He won't. Seraphine calmly lifted a porcelain teacup. The latter was merely. She smiled faintly. A question. And now I have my answer. The king saved her. Again, she slowly looked toward the palace gardens below. Rainwater still shimmered on the flowers. This is becoming dangerous. Not because Emily had survived, but because Damien had reacted without thinking. Twice. A king could ignore curiosity. He could dismiss coincidence. But instinct could not be commanded. Late that night, deep beneath Blackthorn Palace, the ancient moon heart crystal glowed brighter than before. Silver veins spread. Across its surface, the old guardian approached slowly, leaning on his staff. His weathered hands trembled. He whispered the ancient words no one had spoken aloud for decades. The moon has begun to remember. The crystal pulsed once. A vision flickered across its surface. Not clearly, only fragments. A little girl wrapped in silver cloth. A burning village beneath a crimson moon. A woman running through the forest, clutching an infant to her chest. Golden eyes. Black wolves. Blood on white snow. Then, the vision disappeared. The guardian staggered backward. His face had turned deathly pale. No, he whispered. It wasn't an orphan. It was a princess. And somewhere above him, completely unaware of the truth hidden beneath the palace, Emily Carter quietly fell asleep. The crescent mark beneath her wrist glowed softly beneath her sleeve. While outside her window, a lone black wolf stood silently beneath the moon, watching, waiting, as if it had finally found the one soul it had been searching for all its life. The kingdom slept beneath a silver moon. Blackthorn Palace did not. Behind its towering walls, candles still burned inside council chambers. Guards changed shifts along the battlements. Messengers crossed silent courtyards carrying sealed orders that could change the fate of entire provinces. And somewhere among them, someone was still hunting Emily Carter. Emily awoke before dawn. For a few peaceful moments, she forgot everything. The strange dream, the broken ladder, the Alpha King's searching eyes, the burning mark beneath her wrist. Then she looked down. A faint silver line still shimmered across her skin before slowly fading into the familiar crescent. She quickly pulled down her sleeve. "No," she whispered. "I'm just tired." She wanted to believe it. But deep inside, she knew something had begun. Something she could neither understand nor stop. Across the palace, Damien had not slept at all. The Order of the Eclipse. A forgotten prophecy. An Omega servant with no past. Two impossible reactions from his wolf. None of it belonged to coincidence anymore. Captain Theodore entered the king's study carrying another folder. I questioned everyone assigned to the library yesterday. And nothing. No one admits seeing the servant who escaped. Damien closed the report. They're afraid. Yes. Or loyal. Theodore nodded. To someone inside the palace. Silence settled between them. Finally Damien spoke. Increase Emily Carter's security. Theodore looked surprised. Without telling her? If she knows she's being watched, whoever is hunting her will disappear. And if they're already inside the palace? Damien's silver eyes hardened. Then I want them to believe they still have an opportunity. By mid-morning, Emily was assigned to help prepare the old greenhouse for the annual Moon Blossom Festival. The greenhouse stood beyond the western gardens, hidden beneath climbing ivy and ancient stone arches. It had once belonged to the late queen. Few servants visited now. Emily immediately fell in love with it. Thousands of flowers bloomed beneath the glass ceiling. White lilies, blue moon orchids, silver jasmine. The air smelled warm and sweet. An elderly botanist smiled as she entered. "You must be Emily." "Yes, sir. I hear flowers seem to like you." Emily laughed softly. "I think they simply enjoy being left alone." The old man chuckled. A wise answer. For several hours they worked peacefully. Emily watered delicate moon orchids while the botanist trimmed old vines. She hummed quietly without realizing it. The greenhouse seemed strangely calming, almost familiar. She paused before one enormous silver vine climbing the center pillar. Its flowers were unlike anything she had ever seen. Each petal glowed faintly beneath the sunlight. "What flower is this?" The botanist looked up. His expression changed. "Impossible." Emily frowned. "What? You shouldn't be able to see them." She blinked. "They're right here." The old man's face slowly lost its color. "No," he whispered. "They haven't bloomed in 20 years." Emily reached toward one blossom. The instant her fingertips brushed its petals, every flower in the greenhouse burst into bloom. Soft silver light filled the room. Hundreds of unopened buds unfolded simultaneously. The air became rich with the scent of moonflowers. Emily stepped backward in astonishment. I didn't. The elderly botanist stared in complete disbelief. They answered you. At that exact moment. Miles away, deep beneath Blackthorn Palace, the moonheart crystal flared brilliantly. The old guardian nearly dropped his staff. It has begun. He breathed. There can be no doubt now. Elsewhere, Damien stopped in the middle of a council meeting. His wolf had suddenly become alert. Not aggressive. Drawn. As though it sensed something awakening across the palace. One minister continued discussing trade routes. Damien heard none of it. Instead, he slowly stood. Continue without me. The council members exchanged confused glances. Before anyone could question him, the Alpha King had already left. Emily still stood frozen inside the glowing greenhouse. The flowers gradually returned to normal. The silver light faded. Only the fragrance remained. The elderly botanist approached slowly. His hands trembled. Tell me, when were you born? Emily shook her head. I don't know. Who were your parents? I never knew them. He swallowed hard, then carefully knelt before her. Emily's eyes widened. Sir, what are you doing? The old man lowered his head. My queen. Emily immediately stepped backward. No, you've mistaken me. I've mistaken nothing. Tears filled the old man's eyes. I cared for these flowers when your mother was still alive. Emily's heartbeat stopped. My mother. He looked up slowly. These moon vines bloom only for women of the lunar bloodline. Emily stared at him. The words made no sense. I don't understand. You will. A voice interrupted them. But not today. Both turned. Damien stood at the greenhouse entrance. Sunlight framed his broad shoulders. His silver eyes immediately found Emily. Then the blooming vines. Then the old botanist kneeling before her. The old man quickly rose. Your Majesty. Damien's gaze lingered on Emily. Leave us. The botanist hesitated only a second before quietly obeying. Silence filled the greenhouse. Emily couldn't meet Damien's eyes. I didn't do anything. I know. They just. She looked helplessly toward the flowers. Opened. Damien slowly walked toward the silver vine. He touched one blossom. Nothing happened. He looked at Emily. You try. She hesitated, then gently placed one finger against the vine. Instantly, silver light spread through every branch. Flowers blossomed again. The greenhouse shimmered as though moonlight had entered at midday. Neither of them spoke, because neither could deny what they had just seen. Damien looked directly into Emily's eyes. Who are you? Emily's voice trembled. I don't know. For the first time since becoming king, Damien believed her completely. Hidden beyond the greenhouse wall, Lady Seraphine watched through a narrow crack in the ivy. Every color drained from her face. The flowers, the light, the old botanist kneeling, the king's expression. It was all happening exactly as the prophecy had warned. Her hands slowly curled into fists. So, she whispered, it really is you. For years, she had feared an unknown rival. Now, that rival had a face. A name. Emily Carter. No, not Emily Carter. Someone far more dangerous. Someone the moon itself had begun to recognize. Seraphine quietly stepped away from the window. Her hesitation disappeared. If destiny refused to spare her, then she would no longer spare destiny. She turned toward the shadows where a cloaked figure waited. It's time. The figure bowed. My lady. Seraphine's voice became cold. Before the king learns who she truly is, make sure she disappears forever. As the cloaked assassin vanished into the forest path, a cold wind swept through the blooming greenhouse. Emily shivered without knowing why. Damien instinctively stepped closer. His wolf had only one thought. Protect her. Even if he still did not understand why losing her already felt impossible. The wind carried the scent of rain long before the storm arrived. Blackthorn Palace stood proudly beneath darkening skies, its silver towers piercing the gathering clouds. To every noble within its walls, it was another ordinary afternoon. Only 3 people sensed something was terribly wrong. Damien, Emily, and the man hidden among the ancient pines beyond the western gardens. Emily left the greenhouse carrying a basket of freshly cut moon blossoms. The elderly botanist had insisted she take them to the palace chapel. They bloom only for a short time, he had said. They deserve to be somewhere peaceful. Emily smiled. I'll take good care of them. She had no idea those flowers had not bloomed in 20 years. nor that half the palace would soon learn they had. As she crossed the stone pathway, servants greeted her as usual. Some smiled, some whispered. Life appeared normal, but the strange warmth beneath her wrist had not disappeared. Every few minutes, the crescent mark pulsed gently beneath her sleeve, almost as if guiding her somewhere. From the highest tower, Damien watched the gardens through an open window. Captain Theodore stood beside him. The botanist's statement has been confirmed. The vines never bloom. They did today. Damien remained silent. And the old man? He has served 3 generations of the royal family. He has never lied. Another long silence followed. Finally, Theodore asked, "Do you believe the prophecy?" Damien looked toward the horizon. "I believe what I saw." "And what did you see?" "I saw flowers recognize someone before I did." The words unsettled even him. A king trusted evidence, not legends. Yet evidence was beginning to resemble legend. Meanwhile, far below, Emily paused beside the palace fountain. A little girl, daughter of one of the palace blacksmiths, sat crying quietly on the stone edge. One of her wooden toys had broken. Emily immediately knelt. "What happened?" The child sniffled. "My wolf." The tiny carved wolf had lost one of its legs. Emily smiled softly. "May I?" The little girl nodded. Emily searched inside her sewing pouch. A little thread, a tiny wooden pin, a few careful movements. "There." The child gasped happily. "It's better than before." Emily laughed. "I don't know about that." The little girl suddenly wrapped both arms around Emily. "Thank you." Emily hugged her gently. Neither of them noticed. Someone hidden among the trees had just aimed a crossbow. The assassin waited patiently. His breathing slowed. His finger rested against the trigger. He had studied Emily for nearly an hour. She had no guards, no weapon, no awareness. The perfect opportunity. He adjusted his aim. Not the child. Only Emily. One clean shot. Then disappear into the forest. Simple. He squeezed the trigger. A sharp whistle cut through the air. High above the courtyard, Damien's wolf exploded into motion. Before his mind understood why, his body already knew. "Emily!" His voice thundered across the gardens. Everyone looked up. Emily instinctively turned. She saw Damien standing on the balcony. Confusion crossed her face. Then, something slammed into her. Strong arms wrapped around her. Captain Theodore. He tackled Emily sideways. The bolt tore through the space where her heart had been only an instant earlier. Instead, it shattered against the fountain. Stone fragments scattered everywhere. The little girl screamed. Guards rushed forward. "Protect the king." "No," Damien roared. "Protect her." The order stunned everyone. Not the king. The servant. Every royal guard immediately changed direction. The assassin cursed beneath his breath. Impossible. How had the king seen him? He abandoned the crossbow and disappeared into the forest. But he wasn't fast enough. Theodore had already seen the direction of the shot. After him, dozens of guards poured through the western gate. The hunt had begun. Emily slowly pushed herself upright. Her breathing came in uneven gasps. The little girl clung tightly to her arm. "It's okay," Emily whispered. "You're safe." The child shook her head violently. "You saved me." Emily frowned. Only then did she realize. The bolt had originally been aimed at the child. She had instinctively stepped between them while turning toward Damien's voice. Without thinking, without hesitation, the assassin had adjusted his aim at the final second, trying to strike Emily instead. Damien reached them moments later. His expression remained calm. Too calm. Only Theodore recognized the fury hidden beneath it. Damien crouched before Emily. "Are you injured?" Emily slowly shook her head. "No. You almost died." "I know." His jaw tightened. "You don't sound frightened." Emily looked toward the little girl still holding her hand. "I had time to think only about her." Damien stared at her. Every answer she gave somehow made protecting her feel even more necessary. The palace physician hurried over. "Your Majesty, everyone should return inside." Damien ignored him. Instead, he looked directly at Emily. "You will not walk alone again." Emily blinked. "My duties have changed." She looked confused. "I'm only a servant." Damien answered quietly, "No. You are someone under my protection." The courtyard fell completely silent. Even the wind seemed to stop. An Alpha King publicly placing an Omega servant under royal protection had not happened in living memory. From an upper balcony, Lady Seraphine watched in horror. "No," she whispered. "He's announcing it. Not a title. Not a marriage. something almost as dangerous. A public declaration that harming Emily meant defying the crown itself. Seraphine understood immediately. Time was running out. That evening, the assassin was dragged into the palace dungeons. He had been captured alive, bruised, bleeding, but smiling. Captain Theodore questioned him personally. Who sent you? Silence. Theodore placed the broken crossbow on the table. You won't survive this. The assassin smiled wider. I was never meant to. Theodore narrowed his eyes. What does that mean? The assassin slowly raised his head. You think this is about one servant? He laughed softly. It never was. The room grew colder. The moon has awakened. The eclipse remembers. And the king is already too late. Before Theodore could stop him, the assassin bit down hard. Hidden poison shattered inside his mouth. Within seconds, he collapsed, dead. The interrogation ended before it truly began. Late that night, Damien stood alone in the ancient chapel. The moonlight streamed through colored glass, painting silver patterns across the stone floor. He had not come to pray. Kings rarely prayed for themselves. But tonight, he found no peace anywhere else. Behind him, quiet footsteps echoed. The old guardian of the moon heart approached slowly. His white robes brushed the floor. He bowed deeply. Your Majesty. Damien turned. You requested an audience. I did. The guardian studied the king's face, then spoke the words Damien had unknowingly feared. The moon heart has awakened. Damien's expression hardened. Explain. It awakens only when the bloodline it protects returns. The royal bloodline? The guardian slowly shook his head. No. A forgotten one. The first bloodline. The daughters of the moon. Damien remained silent. The old man continued. For 400 years, we believed they had vanished. Another pause. Then, they have not. Damien's heartbeat slowed. He already knew the answer before asking. Who? The guardian lifted his tired eyes. I cannot speak her name. Not until the moon confirms it. But I can tell you this. He stepped closer. The one your wolf refuses to leave is no ordinary Omega. The chapel bells suddenly rang across the palace. 1, 2, 3 times. Not by human hands. The ancient bells only sounded on their own for one reason. When destiny changed the course of a kingdom. Far away, asleep beneath the old clock tower, Emily stirred uneasily. The crescent mark beneath her wrist shone brighter than ever before. And hidden beneath layers of ancient stone, the moonheart crystal released a pulse of silver light that spread beneath the entire palace. The kingdom had just crossed a threshold from which there would be no return. The ancient bells echoed across Blackthorn Palace. Once, twice, 3 times. Every servant stopped working. Every guard instinctively looked toward the old chapel tower. Even the wolves resting inside the royal kennels suddenly stood, their ears lifted, their eyes fixed toward the eastern wing of the palace. An uneasy silence settled over the kingdom. No one under the age of 80 had ever heard the ancient bells ring by themselves. Yet the oldest members of the court recognized the sound immediately. Destiny had awakened. Emily woke with a violent gasp. Moonlight flooded her small room beneath the clock tower. Her heart pounded painfully against her ribs. The silver mark beneath her wrist burned brighter than ever before. She hurried toward the wash basin, splashing cold water across her face. It's just another dream, she whispered. But when she looked into the mirror, she froze. For only a heartbeat, her eyes reflected silver instead of their usual soft gray. Then, the vision disappeared. Emily stumbled backward. No. Her breathing became uneven. What is happening to me? A knock interrupted her panic. Emily. Mrs. Vale's familiar voice came through the door. The king has requested everyone gather in the grand hall. Emily quickly pulled down her sleeve. I'm coming. Within the hour, the palace was filled with nervous whispers. Every noble family had returned. Royal advisors gathered around the ceremonial platform. The oldest priests of the Moon Temple stood in silent rows wearing robes embroidered with silver thread. Even Captain Theodore appeared unusually tense. Emily quietly took her place among the palace attendants near the rear of the hall. She hoped no one would notice her. She was wrong. The moment Damien entered, his silver eyes instinctively searched the room, until they found her. Only then did he continue walking. Lady Seraphine noticed. So did Theodore. So did nearly every noble watching the king. The whispers began again. Damien took his place before the throne. His expression remained calm. But inside, nothing felt calm anymore. The guardian's words echoed relentlessly. The one your wolf refuses to leave is no ordinary Omega. He looked briefly toward Emily. His wolf responded instantly. Not excitement. Recognition. A deep certainty growing stronger each day. The great doors suddenly opened. Every conversation stopped. The old guardian of the moon heart entered the hall. For decades he had lived beneath the palace, rarely seen by anyone. Many younger nobles had believed he was only a legend. He walked slowly toward the throne, then bowed. Your Majesty. Damien inclined his head. You requested the council. I did. The old guardian turned toward the gathered nobles. His voice, though aged, carried through the entire chamber. For 400 years, the moon heart has remained asleep. No one interrupted. It has awakened. Shock rippled through the hall. One elderly lord laughed nervously. Impossible. The guardian looked directly at him. So I believed. He raised an ancient silver staff. The crystal embedded at its tip glowed softly. The moon heart awakens only when one carrying the lunar bloodline returns. Every noble immediately exchanged uneasy glances. Some instinctively looked toward Lady Seraphine. She stood perfectly still. Her family had long claimed descent from one of the oldest royal lines. Surely, if anyone fit the prophecy, it would be her. The guardian slowly scanned the room, then quietly said, the moon itself will reveal the truth. Far beneath the palace, massive stone doors groaned open for the first time in decades. Torches burst into blue flame without anyone touching them. The hidden chamber of the moon heart revealed itself. Hundreds of nobles followed in stunned silence. Emily remained near the back. She wished she could disappear. Something about the chamber made her uneasy. The walls were covered in ancient carvings. Great wolves, crescent moons, women crowned with silver light. At the center, the moon heart crystal floated above a circular stone altar. Its silver glow filled the chamber like living moonlight. Emily stared at it. A strange sadness settled inside her chest, as though she had been here before. Impossible. She had never seen this place. Had she? The guardian raised his staff. The moon heart recognizes truth. It cannot be deceived. It cannot be persuaded. It cannot be commanded. He looked toward the gathered nobles. Each bloodline may approach. One by one, the oldest noble families stepped forward. Lord Hawthorne. Nothing. Lady Verena. Nothing. House Eldridge. Nothing. Several others. Nothing. The crystal remained silent. Then, Lady Seraphine smiled confidently. She stepped toward the altar. Every noble watched expectantly. She placed her elegant hand upon the ancient stone. Nothing happened. Silence. Another heartbeat passed. Still nothing. Her confident smile faltered. This, she whispered, is impossible. The guardian lowered his eyes. The moon does not lie. For the first time in years, fear flashed openly across Seraphine's face. Emily quietly turned toward the exit. She didn't belong here. This had nothing to do with her. She had almost reached the doorway when the crystal suddenly pulsed. Once, softly, everyone stopped. A second pulse followed. Brighter. The silver light stretched across the chamber floor. Not toward the nobles. Not toward the throne. Toward the doorway. Toward Emily. She froze. The light continued moving, like moonlight flowing across water, until it reached her feet. The entire chamber fell silent. Emily looked around in confusion. Your Majesty, she whispered. I didn't. Before she could finish, the crescent mark beneath her sleeve exploded with warmth. Silver light burst through the fabric. The hidden mark became visible to everyone. Gasps echoed throughout the chamber. The guardian slowly fell to one knee. His voice trembled. The mark of Selene. More elders followed, then priests, then royal scholars. One after another, they knelt, not before the throne, before Emily. She stared at them in horror. Please, she whispered. You're making a mistake. Damien stepped forward. His heart pounded harder than it had in battle. Emily. She looked at him desperately. I don't understand. Neither did he. Yet his wolf already did. The ancient instinct inside him surged with overwhelming certainty. Her. Protect her. Never let her stand alone again. The moon heart answered. A brilliant pillar of silver light erupted from the crystal. It surrounded Emily completely. Her simple servant's uniform fluttered in an invisible wind. Her hair lifted gently. The crescent mark shone like a star. Ancient symbols awakened across the chamber walls. Words forgotten for centuries appeared in glowing silver script. The guardian read them aloud through tears. When the daughter of the moon returns, the king's wolf shall remember. Before the king remembers himself. Damien slowly approached. Not as a king, not as an alpha, simply as a man searching for the truth. He stopped only a few steps away. Emily, the silver light reflected in her frightened eyes. I truly don't know who I am. Damien believed her. Every word. He reached out slowly. Not to claim her, not to command her, only to reassure her. Emily hesitated, then placed her trembling hand in his. The instant their fingers intertwined, a wave of ancient power swept through the chamber. Every wolf inside the palace lifted its head and howled toward the moon. The moon heart blazed brighter than the sun. The ancient carvings illuminated, and high above Blackthorn Palace, storm clouds split apart. A full moon appeared in the middle of the afternoon. The kingdom had just witnessed a miracle. But among the crowd, one person was no longer watching with fear. Lady Seraphine was watching with hatred. Hidden inside her sleeve, a black crystal slowly began to glow. She closed her hand around it. If the moon insists on choosing you. Her whisper disappeared beneath the howling wolves. Then I'll make the moon watch you die. Outside, thunder rolled across the mountains. Not from the storm, from something far older, something that had just awakened. And it was coming. No one moved. No one dared. The silver light surrounding Emily slowly faded, but its warmth lingered in the chamber like the memory of dawn. The moon heart crystal continued to pulse above the ancient altar. Once, twice. Then, its light settled into a calm, steady glow, as if it had finally found what it had been waiting centuries to protect. Emily lowered her trembling hand. The room remained on its knees. Not because a king had commanded it, because something older than every throne inside the kingdom had spoken, and no one possessed the authority to argue with destiny. Emily looked around in disbelief. Please. Her voice shook. Stand up. No one moved. The elderly guardian lifted tear-filled eyes toward her. For 400 years, we have waited for this day. Emily slowly shook her head. I don't understand. I am only Emily Carter. The guardian smiled sadly. You were. A heavy silence followed. But names can be forgotten. Blood cannot. Lady Seraphine's fingernails dug into her palms. This couldn't be happening. Not here. Not in front of the entire kingdom. She had spent her whole life believing she would become queen. She had mastered every royal custom, every noble dance, every diplomatic lesson, every political alliance. Emily had spent that same life washing laundry, helping gardeners, repairing children's toys. How could destiny choose her? No, destiny had made a mistake. Damien stepped toward Emily, not as a ruler approaching a subject, not as an alpha claiming an omega, but as someone who finally understood why every instinct inside him had refused to let her suffer. He stopped only an arm's length away. You don't have to face this alone. Emily looked into his silver eyes. For days, she whispered, I thought something was wrong with me. There isn't. His voice remained calm. There never was. For the first time since arriving at Blackthorn Palace as an abandoned child, Emily felt something she had never known. She felt seen. Suddenly, a violent tremor shook the chamber. Dust rained from the ancient ceiling. The moon heart crystal flickered wildly. The guardian's face drained of color. No, he whispered. They found it. Another explosion echoed through the underground halls. Royal guards drew their swords. Captain Theodore immediately stepped in front of Damien. Your Majesty. A terrified messenger stumbled into the chamber. The western gate has fallen. Everyone turned. The messenger struggled to breathe. Unknown warriors. They carry the eclipse emblem. The chamber erupted into chaos. They've breached the palace. They're heading toward the moon chamber. The guardian struck his staff against the stone floor. They've waited for centuries. They came the moment the moon revealed her. Damien's expression hardened. The hesitation disappeared. In its place stood the Alpha King who had never lost a battlefield. He turned toward Theodore. Seal every entrance. Protect the civilians. The moon chamber becomes the final line. Yes, Your Majesty. Theodore disappeared instantly. Damien faced the royal guard. No one reaches her. Hundreds of armored wolves struck their fists against their chests. Yes, Your Majesty. Emily stepped forward. I don't want anyone dying because of me. Damien looked at her. They're not. They're fighting because this kingdom protects its people. His eyes softened. And now, you're one of them. A deafening crash shook the chamber. The massive iron doors exploded inward. Smoke poured inside. Figures dressed in black armor entered through the shattered entrance. Each carried curved silver blades. Each wore the ancient eclipse crest. At their center stood a tall man whose face was hidden beneath a black wolf mask. He laughed softly. So, the moon finally chose. His gaze locked onto Emily. We've searched for you since the night you were born. Emily's heartbeat stopped. What? The masked leader slowly removed one glove. A deep scar crossed his hand. Your mother almost escaped. But she made one mistake. She trusted people. Emily's knees weakened. My mother? The man's smile widened. She died protecting you. Silence consumed the chamber. The words struck harder than any blade. Emily had spent her entire life believing she had simply been abandoned. Now, she learned the truth. She had been loved. Enough for someone to die protecting her. A tear slipped down her cheek. Damien saw it. Something ancient inside him finally broke free. His wolf no longer whispered. It roared. Mine. Not as possession. As promise. Protect. Cherish. Stand beside. Forever. The masked leader lifted his sword. Kill the Alpha. Bring me the Moon Daughter. Dozens of Eclipse warriors charged. The chamber exploded into battle. Steel collided with steel. Royal guards held the narrow entrance. Captain Theodore fought like a storm. Every step backward cost the enemy blood. Damien never left Emily's side. One assassin broke through the line. His blade flashed toward Emily. Damien caught the strike with his own sword. The impact echoed through the chamber. The assassin attacked again. Again. Damien drove him backward with overwhelming strength. Emily watched in stunned silence. He wasn't protecting a prophecy. He was protecting her. Another attacker slipped behind Damien. Emily saw it first. Behind you. Without thinking, she grabbed Damien's arm and pulled. The hidden blade missed his heart by inches. Instead, it sliced across Emily's shoulder. Blood stained her pale sleeve. Emily! Damien caught her before she fell. The instant his hand touched the wound, the crescent mark burst into brilliant silver light. The moon heart answered. A pillar of moonlight descended through solid stone. The entire chamber shook. Every Eclipse warrior froze. The ancient carvings illuminated across every wall. The masked leader staggered backward. No, it cannot awaken completely. The light surrounded Damien and Emily together. The warmth erased every fear inside Emily's heart. She looked up. Their eyes met. Neither spoke. Words were no longer necessary. The bond had already chosen. The guardian slowly smiled through tears. The moon has completed its promise. The king has found his queen. The Eclipse warriors retreated. Not because they had been defeated. Because they had failed. The masked leader pointed his sword toward Damien. This isn't over. The next time, there will be no palace to protect her. He disappeared into the collapsing smoke with the surviving invaders. The battle was over. For now. Hours later, the first light of dawn spread across Blackthorn Palace. Broken stone littered the courtyards. Royal banners hung torn. Servants carried water to the wounded. The kingdom had survived its darkest night in generations. Emily stood alone on the eastern balcony overlooking the sunrise. Her shoulder had been bandaged. She still struggled to understand everything that had happened. Footsteps approached quietly behind her. She smiled before turning. Somehow, she already knew who it was. Damien stopped beside her. Neither spoke immediately. They simply watched the sun rise together. Finally, Emily broke the silence. I still don't know who I am. Damien looked toward the golden horizon. You don't have to discover that alone. She looked at him. And if the kingdom refuses to accept me? He answered without hesitation. Then they'll answer to their king. Emily laughed softly through lingering tears. For the first time, the sound carried hope instead of pain. Below them, the palace slowly awakened. People no longer whispered about the servant who dropped the royal cloak. They spoke instead of the young woman who had risked her own life to save a child, who had never stopped choosing kindness, and whom the moon itself had recognized. The old guardian watched from the chapel steps. He smiled quietly. The prophecy was incomplete. Theodore frowned. What do you mean? The old man looked toward Damien and Emily standing side by side beneath the morning light. The oldest prophecy never ended with the moon finding her daughter. It ended with something far more important. What? The guardian's eyes shone gently. True strength is never the power to rule. It is the courage to protect and the heart to love without fear. High above Blackthorn Palace, two great wolves appeared upon a distant ridge. One black, one silver. They raised their heads together beneath the fading moon, then disappeared into the forest. A new chapter of the kingdom had begun, not because destiny had crowned a queen, but because an alpha king had recognized that the greatest power was never found in bloodlines. It was found in the quiet courage of the girl everyone else had overlooked. The end.